5 sessions where we'll be exploring the nature and the management of ego. And as I pointed out last time, this ego is the heart. It is the very core of all that we are trying to accomplish on the spiritual path. And we talked a little bit about the pre-egoic stage. We talked about the ego stages, and we're going to talk about trans-ego stages. And I want to remind you that the ego is the very last cover that we will shed on our way back to our oneness with the Creator. So ego is will be with us a long time, and you have to understand it is even your ego that is on the spiritual path. It is out of ego that you pursue meditation. It is out of ego that you even pursue God. Without ego, you will make no movement whatsoever. So we have to understand ego in a very different light. And the problem for most of us is that we have ego deficiency disorder. Now, I know that sounds strange, but if you have understood and been following me, then you will have to understand that just as there is a pre-egoic stage within the womb of our parents where there is yet no ego, the potential for ego is there. But the child in the mother's womb has no awareness of their separation. And remember, we define ego as fundamentally the experience of being separate from that which exists. You see? And the child is separate in the mother's womb, but has no awareness of his separateness. And that whole birthing process, that whole entrance into the world, is nothing more than the increasing awareness of the individual's separateness. And it is a stage. And that stage has to be fully gone into. We talk about on the path disciplining certain negative states of mind. You have to understand the ego exists, that feeling of separateness exists even before we get a mind. So when we talk about disciplining mind, when we talk about dealing with the perversions of mind, when we talk about anger, lust, greed, attachment, all of those are rooted in ego. Ego is always the last one to go. So we really have to try to really understand this whole evolution from the pre-egoic stage through the ego stage to the trans-ego stage. And with that understanding, then we're able to ground ourselves solidly on the path. A few things more has to be understood when we talk about this subject of ego because of its immense importance for those of us who are on the spiritual path. Ego will not in any way be affected by your changing your philosophies. Now, you can change your philosophy all you want. You can go from Hindu to Muslim, from Muslim to Christian, from Christian to Hindu, from Hindu to Taoist. It makes no difference. The ego will remain unaffected. You will still suffer. You will still experience the limitations of your ego because those kinds of activities are in the mind. So you can go on changing the way you think, and that is meaningless because the ego precedes even the process of thinking. It is more integral to your being. You see my point? And I want that to be clarified because most often the error that is made by those of us who enter onto a spiritual path think that by changing our thinking, by changing your opinions, by changing your worldview, by changing your religion, by changing your philosophy, that you have done something to your ego. You have done nothing to your ego. You cannot think yourself out of an egoic situation. Hence the necessity for meditation. And I'm always going to be expressing that because one of the characteristics of the immature ego is that it does not wish to yield itself to the process called meditation. Meditation is the only thing that can dissolve the experience of being an ego. There is no other way to dissolve the experience of being an ego whatsoever. So I want to emphasize that because there is a stage in ego development where one gets caught up in what I call talk religion, talk mysticism, talk philosophy, where the whole emphasis is on talk. The whole emphasis is on acquiring different ways to express your opinions about these matters. But talk religion does nothing to ego. Talk mysticism has no effect on ego at all. But talk mysticism, talk religion are stages that the ego has to go through. After all, you have to start somewhere. But I want you to clearly understand that the authentic spiritual path always begins beyond the realm of talk. So I don't want you to get comfortable because we have discussed so many things here. I've given you enough data so that you could talk mysticism for the next millennium. But you shouldn't get stuck in talk mysticism. I don't want you stuck in talk religion, because then you've really made no progress. You simply change your opinion. So we have to always bear in mind that when we talk about ego management, what we really are talking about is meditation and that process that dissolves the experience of being separate from that which exists. Now, one of the things that I certainly discussed in some detail last time we were together was the different stages of the evolution that our egos go through, if you recall. And we talked about how the first phase of the development of ego has to do with the ego identifying with the body. That is, the ego takes a form, don't it? The form that the ego takes is first on the level of the body. And so very often our sense of who we are is inimically linked to this body. And the feeling is that I am the body. So this is the very first and most primitive stage in the evolution of our egos. And what happens so often is that most of us very seldom evolve beyond this first stage. And for our whole life, our identification is with this physical body. And what is the downside of the identification with the physical body? As long as your feeling that I am this body persists, then your dukkha will be tremendous. Your suffering will be tremendous because this thing will go. This body is on its way out of here. This body is of the nature to grow old. This body is of the nature to become ill. This body will perish, and all relationships connected with it will also go. And because we are so identified with this body, then we have therefore the illusion that we will die. The fear of death becomes our greatest fear. We are all afraid of the fact that you're going to die. But this is the reality. This body, this ego, is going to perish. And so the very first primary stage in the evolution of this feeling of separateness that I've called ego is that this feeling of separateness now get associated with a form, which is this physical body. And we talked about the second stage. Who took good notes? What was the second stage in the evolution of the ego? Self. Right. The self-identity. Right. We get a name. Now we give this body a name, and now the ego has gotten a little stronger. I've associated who I am with this body, and I have now also acquired a name, an identity. And that is the next stage in the evolution of the ego. You notice the small child now starts responding to its name. It knows its name. And it starts putting together the first foundation of a persona. They start developing the continuity of identity. So the acquisition of identity, name, and your relationship, this is my mother, this is my brother, this is my sibling, this is this, etc., etc. All of these things are added on. And again, many of us never go beyond that. Never go beyond that. So we talked a lot about these evolutionary stages. We talked about the third stage in the evolution of the ego, that stage that we have called the extension of ego, where we now have extended and incorporated other things and people into the basis of our identity. Is that right? This is the stage that attachment sits in. This is the age where my and mine emerges. Now we have the concept of mine, things belonging to us. And we get attached. Right? And for sure, the vast majority of us never emerge out of that state. Never emerge. Every time something that was mine perishes, something in me dies. It is almost as if I have died. Some of my life go out. Now, I'm bound to lose my child. I'm bound to lose my wife. And then when that happened, because I have incorporated my child and my wife into my basic identity, now something in me dies. I have incorporated my house into my identity. So now when the house burned down, notice how I suffer. It is as if I've died. I've incorporated my job, the way I earn my living, into my identity. So now when I get fired from my corporate position, I am so down, so dejected, I hurl myself off the bridge. I have incorporated my wealth into my identity. And so now when I experience financial ruin, I blow my brains out. Because it is as if I have died. Because I have extended my identity now to incorporate other people and things. And since the nature of the creation is constant change, things are coming into being, things are going out of being. So I experience this kind of horrible chaos all the time. I experience tremendous insecurity. What is insecurity? Have you ever thought? Why do you feel so insecure? What is that?
Not in control.
Right, you're not in control, but you're not in control of something that is vital to you, isn't that right? Mm-hmm. Is that right? Mm-hmm. This whole feeling of security and insecurity begins to come into place at the third evolutionary stage in the development of this. And when we have not evolved beyond that, people who have not evolved beyond that have no experience of security whatsoever. Can you imagine a life like that? Where you are constantly in a state of anxiety. Constantly. It is not a pleasant experience. And the whole effort is to control, as June has pointed out to us. When you are in a state of insecurity and anxiety, automatically you will seek to control. But how will you control the world? How would you control life? Is this possible? You can't even control yourself. How are you going to control all of the variables of life? And not being able to achieve this degree of control, then you just suffer mentally. Now you have plenty of money for today, but you can't enjoy it because you are so full of tomorrow and how to control it that you can't even enjoy the now. We cannot even live in the present. And remember, please make a note, life can only happen in the present. There is no such thing as living down the line. But I noticed that we all have done what? We have pushed our happiness somewhere off in the distant near future. You're planning on being happy in the future. Somewhere in the future. Why? Because you don't know how to be happy in the now. And that is the only place where happiness can happen. So this loss of the ability to experience security goes a long way in shaping our miseries. So most of us then very often never get beyond this third stage in the evolution and the development of ego. And this sounds very strange, I know, because most of you who have been studying mysticism, spirituality, philosophy, New Age thought, things of that nature, have heard so much talk about the fact that the ego is the greatest barrier in the way of the individual quest for God realization and enlightenment. And of course that's true, but you have never understood ego. You have been trying to drop your ego. I'm telling you, you don't have enough ego to drop. Your problem is not ego, it's lack of ego. There's no maturity. And you can begin to, as you examine these primary stages in the evolution of our ego, which incidentally more often than not take place before the age of 7, then you can really see spiritually where you at. Most of us spiritually is still 6 or 7 years old. It's amazing. It is amazing. The fourth stage in the evolution and development of the ego, what was that, my brother? After extension, we have image.
Development of self.
Right, the development of our self-image. That's right. That's
great too.
right. We start feeling that we are doers. We start self-esteem starts developing. You see. Now you can start having the experience of pride. Have you noticed? How old were you when you started feeling proud? At what age did your arrogance seep in? Have you ever noticed? Have you ever thought? Have you looked? Have you examined? Have you looked into yourself? Most often we define ego as this exaggerated arrogance. Is that right? Yeah. The false basis of pride. The arrogation to ourselves of qualities and characteristics that in reality we don't even possess. But that whole process of arrogating to ourselves qualities and characteristics that we don't possess, which makes up the foundation of our vanity and our arrogance, began when you were a child. In this fourth developmental stage is where this self started picking up the capacity to have the experience of esteem. Esteem comes from the same root word as estimation, your estimation. And when a child is in that stage, their whole preoccupation is on doing. They want to show you that they can do stuff. Our pride is fundamentally rooted in our desire to show people we can do stuff. Look at me, I can do stuff. Right? And we almost never grow out of that. Look at me, I can make money. Look at me, I can talk good. Look at me, I'm very cultured. You know. The whole thing is say somebody look at me, I can do something quote unquote good. It's childish. It starts when we're 3 or 4 years old. Mommy, 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 look what I did, look what I did. Now, mommy is not around anymore, perhaps. So you saying, world, 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 look at me, look what I did, world, look what I did, world, look what I did, neighbors. And the tragedy is that you get trapped in that syndrome, and now everything that you do is done to get the attention of the world. There is nothing intrinsic in it. You're not going to school because you want knowledge. You're going to school because you want status. You want the PhD. You want the recognition. You want the honor. You want the status of it. You don't want no knowledge. You're 3 years old. You still want people to hang your scribblings on the refrigerator door. The ego has not matured beyond that point where it lives for the commentary of others. And millions of people are locked in this life, living for the commentary of others. And it's as childish as it was 30, 40 years ago for some of us. But our egos have not matured. Our sense of identity has not matured beyond that. And our whole life is wasted at And the idea is that I want you to see into this. I want you to look deep into this. You see. I want you to go very deep into this. And I want you to see how this drama is playing out in your own intrapsychic realms. Brother, what was the fifth? Self-image. We now, after we got the feedback from the people, oh, baby, this is a pretty picture, and they hung it on the refrigerator, then you start coming to some conclusions about yourself. Is that right? And you start forming an image of yourself. Now, if mommy did not put the picture against the refrigerator, you see, and praise you, then you still come to a conclusion about yourself. So whether the parent praise or don't praise, it makes no difference. You still, as a child, are going to come to some conclusion about yourself. And those conclusions about yourself form the foundation of the image that you become, your ego image. And it is interesting. Look into your image that you have of yourself. How do you see yourself? Now, I know you're afraid of these kind of questions. I know this. You're afraid of these kind of questions. Because these questions will force you to grow up. But look into it, if you have the courage. From where did you get this image of yourself? Where did it come from? Can you locate a source other than the commentary of other people? What do you know about yourself independent of the commentaries of other people? What do you know about yourself that hasn't been told to you by others? Do you know anything about yourself that does not fall in that category? Is your whole image of who you are made up of the commentaries and the remarks of the people in your formative years? Oh, Bhagwan, he's such a good little boy. Now, are you 50 years later still walking around thinking you mama's big boy? Are you still thinking you daddy's little girl? All these many years? Look into it. Now, some of us have formed images of ourselves that has no correlation to our reality whatsoever. Perhaps the person that made the commentary on you when you were 4 or 5 years old was mistaken. Maybe they called you stupid because perhaps they were stupid. That's possible, isn't it? Right? And they said, well, you my son, I'm stupid, therefore you can't be anything but stupid, right? And they passed that down to you, and then you incorporated that into your ego formation. And you came out of your early childhood with the image that, I'm a stupid so-and-so, so-and-so. And with that conclusion, you forgot all about going to college. You forgot all about pursuing those areas in life that requires intelligence. Why? Because you have become convinced somewhere in your early developmental stages that you are not intelligent. Or you were convinced, I am not pretty, or I'm not handsome, you see, or I'm not athletic. Or you've been convinced that you are athletic and you're not. You've been convinced you are pretty and you are not. It goes both ways. It cuts both ways. But you have this image that you have of yourself. And our whole lifestyle emerges out of that image that we have of ourselves. An image that we formed probably when we were 6 or 7 years old. You have to investigate that. You have to look deep into that. You have to come to a certain knowledge about yourself that is not other-based. You have to look deep into yourself. What Buddha called vipassana, looking into yourself. We will talk in greater details about these things. But just for those of you who weren't here, we simply want to share with you what the ground that we covered in the last workshop, and then we will begin to explore a little deeper. After this development of the image of ourselves comes the development of the rational self, the sixth stage in the evolution of the ego. Now we begin to develop this rational dimension. Now for sure we know now almost nobody ever goes beyond it. Is that right? Rational. We can think. And we get caught up in it. We can think. Now we start having the experience that we are always right. We can think. And because we can use logic and reasoning, now because we can do deductive and inductive thinking, it is nowhere in the world we can believe we're wrong. We start actually having the feeling that I know. The feeling that you know that you have knowledge occurs in the sixth developmental stage of it. Beneath these, you don't feel you know anything, hence your dependency on others. At the sixth stage, you can say, well, girl, I don't care what you think. I know I look good. I mean, you start getting you some knowledge now, right? You're free up from dependency on the commentaries and the opinions of others. You now have your own epistemology. You have your own system for the acquisition of knowledge that transcends the commentary of others about you. Right? And you feel it is infallible and can't be told anything. Now they can't tell you nothing. Because this ability to generate a sense of knowledge, it is so full of maya, so disillusioned, that it's hard to believe that you don't know anything. It is as difficult as believing that you don't exist. That's hard. But to now understand that you don't know anything, at this stage, it's impossible. It's impossible. Hence, most of us at this level only learn from experience. There is no other way to live. Children, when they get into this thing, now you tell them, the fire's hot. No, the fire's not hot, mommy. And you argue and you try to convince them, but does it do any good? They have to stick their hand in the fire. Now, son, don't shoot the dope. No, this dope, I'm not going to get addicted. I know what I'm doing. I'm just going to, hit this pipe of just a little bit. I'm all right. I'm not capable of becoming a drug addict. I know what I'm doing. And then the boy hits the pipe in the string. The girl who thinks she's ready to be a mom. I'm grown. She's 13 now, but she's grown. I'm ready to have a baby. I'm ready to do all of these things. I know what I'm doing. You see. But they have to go into life and have the experiences. And we all can identify with that. Look how many things that we have done in our life under the spell of certainty. Under the illusion that we actually knew what we were doing. Be honest. Look into it. And what has been the outcome of those things? Look into it. And remember, it was preceded by the feeling that I know what I'm doing. I've thought about it. I've reasoned it out. The problem, of course, with knowledge that is based on reasoning is that because deductive and inductive logic is always based on data, they are data-based systems. And since you can never have all of the data, therefore your conclusion reached on that data will always be incomplete. Hence the margin of error. Hence the margin of error. There is no way for your biocomputer to have conscious availability to all of the data of your many lifetimes. So you work off a little data and you perform some deductive or inductive reasoning and you come to a conclusion, have the euphoric experience of certainty, act upon it, only to find out that there was an area that your data did not cover. You understand? And whoop, There it is. But now it's too late because the law of karma said you got to undergo your consequences. Yes, you married the wrong woman. You married the wrong man. Your calculation was off. You miscalculated. But it's too late. The suffering has to be gone through. Asdamo sanatano. This is the law. This is the way it is. And then the dukkha is there. But most of the suffering that we are undergoing as a result of these miscalculations are all related to this illusion that our rational thinking produces certain knowledge. And this is the sixth stage in the evolution of our ego. More mature than just the body ego, of course. More mature, but still subject to putting us at risk for the experience of dukkha, of misery. The seventh stage in the development of ego, now where we become more so mature that we're able to reflect back on our life. We begin to start probing, we're going deeper into things. We're reflecting. Right? Our life is becoming more intentional now, you see. We're beginning to live more deliberately. Before, you're not living deliberately. You're just doing shit. You see. You're just going wherever the wind blows you. Your living is not on purpose. You're not living on purpose. It's not deliberate. It's not conscious. You're like a pile of dust that is swirled and blown in all directions by the wind. You see? Totally at the mercy of the variables around. Your life is accidental. Everything is an accident. You meet and fall in love by accident. Very accidental. At the seventh stage, you become more reflective, more deliberate. You have learned so much as you have traveled through all of these lower evolutionary stages. And you begin to try to now answer the question, what are you trying to do with your life? These kind of ultimate questions come into your life. And remember, those of us who have not evolved beyond the lower stage of ego, are we concerned with what we're going to do with our life? Are they concerned?
No.
Not at all. These people are not concerned with what they're going to do with their life. They're just out here. If they're locked at the first level, where their identification is fully with the body, these people are strictly into what I'm going to eat and what sex I'm going to have. That's it. Period. They have no other ambition in life. They don't even have ambition. Ambition belongs to the seventh developmental stage of an ego. Egos beneath that, they don't have any ambition. Ambition for what? Other than, of course, to meet their animalistic needs. As we mature as egos, we begin to look at this phenomenon called life, and we begin to ask ourselves that question. What am I trying to do with life? This was the homework that I asked you to reflect on. You need not volunteer your answers, so we're not going to examine them because these are very private answers to those kind of questions. But it is homework you should do. It is homework you have to look into. You have to answer that question. Are you going to live your life at the level of soliciting praise from the world? Do you want the world to put your little life on the refrigerator door with magnets? Is that what you do? Look at me. Look how knowledgeable I am. Look how much knowledge I got. Look how spiritual I am. Look how educated I am. Is that what you're going to do with your life? Waste it? Soliciting? the praise of the world? You stuck somewhere in the third developmental stage where you're trying to just have the feelings of pride. That's what little children are. They want to stimulate their experience of pride. They want to feel as much pride as possible. Look at me, see what I can do. I'm a big boy, I'm a big girl now. Is that what you're doing? What are you trying to do with your life? And you got to know the answer to that. And you got to work on that. That is mature ego work. And after we begin to do that, that is where we begin to start the searches. The spiritual search usually starts from the seventh stage in the development of the ego. That's where the spiritual search now really starts, because you're looking at it. You know, I'm going to die. You've already seen the impermanence of relationships. You start asking these questions. What I want to do, is there a God? If so, how do I discover it? How do I experience it? All those questions. The ego is mature. The immature ego is not concerned with these matters at all. At all. And so this is where we begin. So that is why I've said from the beginning that we have to go through all of these developmental stages until we get to that level of ego maturity where we can begin to reflect and ponder these things. And then we be in a position now to move into the trans-egoic states where we transcend the ego. So today I wanted to start talking with you a little bit then about the trans-egoic stage and what that looks like. And actually, now that you know the various stages and how your ego has developed or is developing, the trans-egoic stage is really a reversal of that whole process. It's interesting. The first stage then, and the trans-egoic stage, where now you are coming down out of this experience of separateness, or you are transcending the experience of being separate. Remember, ego is fundamentally the experience of you being separate. Now, perhaps I should highlight that because I want you to understand how that relates to you. I don't want you to think of that as some kind of abstract, metaphysical, philosophical thing. No. When you are suffering from the experience of separateness, it makes this experience of love almost impossible. Now, this is strange because you've been thinking that that you've been loving people. You've been thinking that some of you actually think you've been in love. And I know it's going to come as a shock to you when I suggest to you that, no, you've not been in no love. You don't have enough, you still caught down in the lower realms of your ego. Your ego is not mature enough to have the experience of love. What you've been experiencing is attachment. What you've been experiencing is that mine and mine phenomenon. My husband, that been a part of your identity. That's not love. It's attachment. So when I say that love becomes possible only when we transcend this ego, why do I say that? Because love is essentially an experience of oneness with another human being. Oneness, not duality. Not me and you. You see, it is a oneness. It is a us experience. There is no clear demarcation between you and the beloved. It is identification in the true sense of the word. You become one with the other individual. And that's not possible unless you are able to start transcending your ego. All of these 7 evolutionary stages of the ego have one common characteristic. They are all selfish. They are all aimed in their own interest. All relationships that we are involved in in these lower evolutionary states of the ego are rooted in selfishness and our own selfishness, our own interest. They are self-aggrandizing, aren't they? Look into it. And that's not love. This experience of love, then, cannot happen until we are beyond the ego. That's why all mystics, all saints, all sages, all seers, with no exception, throughout recorded time, have not differed by one hair on this proposition that love is the highest spiritual experience on the planet. You've been thinking that, oh, well, Bhagwan, what about those lights and those sounds and going into the higher regions? That's your concept. Because that's what your ego wants. The mystics tell you the capacity to experience love is the highest spiritual experience available to human consciousness. Why? Because it causes you to transcend this feeling of separateness. And that is replaced with the experience of oneness. Mature ego, when you get to about the 6th and 7th stage in the maturation of your ego, the potential now for transcendent ego starts manifest itself. And even at these levels of ego, you can begin to even approach this thing called love a little differently. You begin to intuit. And remember, there's another way of knowing other than through logic and reasoning. The intuition. You begin to intuit something. And the one thing that you begin to intuit is, as it relates to this love, this experience of transcending the ego, is what the mystics call the experience of love. And that's what this is all about. This is not about supernatural power. It is not about cities. It's not about reading people's minds. None of that. This thing is strictly about love. That's it. That is the whole point of it all. There is no other point. It's about love. And you begin to intuit certain insights here. And you begin to look into our relationship. And now, and before we have these insights, we be saying things like, well, I love you. Now this is meaningless. Because to love another person means that you have to be able to identify. There has to be a oneness. And that oneness can only arise out of a deep understanding. Hence, you can never have love where there's no understanding. Please make a note. Never has happened, never will happen. To love someone, not only must you have the willingness and the intention to love them. That willingness and intention by itself is not enough. Now you can say, I want to love you. Okay, you're on safe ground. That's okay. That's permitted. But then you can tell Florida, well, you know, Florida, I want to love you. Okay. Now nothing wrong with it. So far, so good. But if you declare I love you, then you have to be able to demonstrate a deep understanding of this. Because love means you understand this person. Love means you understand their suffering, their pain. You understand that. And with that understanding, coupled with your willingness, you're now able to relieve the suffering of another human being. Love is the intent and capacity to relieve the suffering of another human being. The understanding brings you to a level of oneness. You can get in tune. You can feel, you actually feel it. You feel their suffering. You see? There's no longer any distinction. Their suffering is your suffering. You see? Very different. And that requires the ability to merge, right? If you have ego, by definition, you can't merge with nobody. By definition, you are separate. Ego means you have contracted, you have recoiled, you have pulled back, you have isolated yourself from others. You can't relate by definition. Two egos cannot relate. It is wrong to even use the word relationship for two egos. That's not possible. How can two egoistic people be in relationship? There's nothing to relate. They never come near each other at all. And no love. So I want you to bear all of this in mind as we begin to look at this trans-egoic experience that the mystics have called the experience of love. And that's what it's all about. The first thing that we learn to do through meditation, because remember I said talk religion, talk mysticism will have no impact on the transcendent of ego. I have to emphasize that over and over again because I know you like talking. That's why you're here today. So I'll go to Satsang, Bhagwan will be there, he'll be doing some good talking. I know that. That's why you came. But I have to remind you, this talk is not going to do it. The talk is simply to motivate you, to somehow try to seduce you into meditation. Meditation is where it's at. Everything is locked into meditation. You see. Now, the first thing we want to do, we know that the first ego developmental stage is the body ego. This feeling that I am the body. We got to knock that out. I'm not going to give you can't read no book to knock out the experience of being a body. You can read no sutras, no Quran, no Bible, no Gita, no Tao Te Ching, nothing. No book on the planet is going to knock out that experience that you are the body. You come to all of these satsangs that you like, you will leave out of here still feeling that you are the body. Care how elevating the discussion is. Only one thing can knock out the experience of being a physical body, and that is meditation. So hence, the first stage and the transcendent of ego is transcending this experience of being the physical body. And that is done through meditation. Now, we've talked a lot about that, so in your memory, you can pull those files up and review that whole meditation process as we go through this to see how they correlate with each other. The whole purpose in adopting a firm asana, a posture, and to occupy the attention of the mind with an object of concentration. All of that is to create a loss of awareness of the body. In order to lose body awareness, you have to turn your awareness somewhere else, obviously. And in the turning of your attention, your awareness, you lose this experience of just being the body. And you have then transcended the first restriction on the trans-egoic experience of love, of non-separateness. So we have to give up this identity with the body. And that is done through a process of meditation. And you have to clearly understand that. Now, once that is done, do that mean that those who have transcended the body, transcended the ego and all of the 7 stages, don't have the experience of being a body? Of course. But the body is included in a higher experience. Your only experience is being the body. You don't have anything beyond that. The mystics are having a very different experience. Very different. The second thing, in the evolution of the ego, we know that the second covering brother came upon it was this thing of the identity, right? The name. All of that stuff, right? We have to now, right, through a process of spiritual practice, not talk mysticism, not talk religion, but through spiritual practice, we have to now go beyond our identification with our personal history, our names, things of that nature. All of that thinking that you've been doing about me, this me. This me is the whole problem. That's the whole problem. The me is in the way. We can't make spiritual progress because this me is in the way. This me itself is the thing that initially comes to the path. So it has its place. Don't misunderstand me. But our whole ideal is to transcend this thing. To transcend this thing. So in meditation, the objective becomes now, just as we were able to withdraw our attention from this physical body and thereby transcend the experience of simply being a physical body, that our identity expanded, if you will. You see. Similarly, we now have to transcend these psychological limitations that we have imposed upon us in the form of these identities that we have formed. And this too is involved in the process of meditation, because as we draw our attention from our thoughts, you having the experience of your me through thinking. Please make a note. Whenever thinking shuts down, you lose the experience of me. Please make a note. Every day, we all travel in a cycle of consciousness. We move from this wakeful state, where in this state, we're thinking about me. We drop a little lower into the state of dream, where now we're dreaming about me. But there's a third state, Susuti, the mystics call it, that we drop into, where there is no thought about me. But that which you are exists, is that right? When you are in that state of consciousness where there is no dreams going on, do you cease to exist? The entity, conscious, does it cease? No. You act like you guessing. Do you know whether you exist? Huh?
I'm still there.
You still there, aren't you, Bhagwan? That's right. That reality, that which you are, remains. Even in this deep state, don't it? But notice there is no me. There is no experience of me. Because me is an experience that accompanies your thinking. Drop thinking, and you will have no experience of me. You will simply be. Me is a contraction. You have contracted yourself to this tiny little history. This me is a period. It's a dot. It's something very small. It is the smallest form in which you can contract yourself. Is into a me. Because you are infinite. Infinite. And this little me you're talking about, do you know how many me's you have been? Since time immemorial? Billions of me's. You have billions of lives, billions of relationships, billions of careers, millions of them. And you clinging to this little identity in this little lifetime, this little 70 years, on this little speck of mud, drifting aimlessly amidst the appalling immensity of the physical world. And you are defining yourself as that. It's madness. It's madness. When through meditation we're able to shut down this thinking process, we lose the experience of me. And we become nothing but existence. It's very profound. Because you have to understand, look at all your restrictions in your life. It's based on your me. But I can't do that because I'm like this. Now, what are you talking about? Look how many things you have eliminated from your life that you don't even go out and even attempt because you have restricted your abilities to your definition of it. Is this madness? This is madness. I can't do this because I'm like, this is how I am. Nonsense. I'm doing this here. That's what I'm going to keep doing because that's how I am. Nonsense. It is madness. So we have to transcend that. And that causes us to transcend the second stage. And again, we're removing those covers, right? Every time we drop one of these covers, look, we're increasing this experience of non-separateness, right? Becoming closer and closer to a state of maximum freedom. The third, we'd say, remember, was the extended ego, right? stage of mind. Again, when we shut down the thinking process, is there anything that is yours? When you are not thinking, are you having any experience of owning anything? What gives you the experience of owning something? Thinking. Right? What gives you the experience of loss and gain? Thinking. What happens then when we're able to shut down the thinking process that is going on in consciousness, that is serving as the foundation of this ego experience and phenomena? We lose the experience of mind. Everything becomes yours. Everything feels. And another way of looking at it is you could say that this experience of only owning those things connected to the ego gets reversed, gets expanded. Not only do you own this, you own the whole world is yours. It's a different experience. That means that now you respect the other person's property as much as you respect yours. I mean, that's what it looks like on the practical side. For us looking up, that's what it looks like. Those kind of beings, right? Well, now they seem to be as concerned about your stuff as you are. Strange, because you ain't concerned about their stuff. And you're trying to figure out why they're concerned about your stuff, right? They may just be a little bit more spiritually developed than you because you are still contracted. You are still limited, you see, to that me and mine type of stuff. When we shut down thinking, we realize, as the poet said, that we're all interconnected. What happens to one happens to all of us. This distinction drops out. And ancient time, when people were a little closer to this natural state of spirituality, they lived more in that kind of community spirit, didn't they? Right? It's like the children belonged to everybody in the community. It was no such thing. That's not my kid, damn it. I ain't got nothing to do with that. I ain't gonna get involved. That didn't exist. The child belonged to the whole community. Everybody belonged to the community. We've gotten so contracted into our egos that now, even within our own family systems, we have siblings who are struggling, and we say, well, hell, that's so problem. Ain't my problem. We have contracted. America is a manifestation of this contraction to the maximum degree. Here you can step over people bleeding on the street and not even and feel nothing. You feel nothing. And that should be an indictment. That should scare the hell out of you. That you can walk past another person's suffering and you don't feel nothing. You really don't feel nothing. Yes, you feel some sympathy. I'm not talking about sympathy. I'm talking about feeling, compassion. Compassion and sympathy are two different phenomena. Sympathy has to do with your ego tripping. You understand? Oh, look at that poor bum. Unfortunate. Yeah, you see. You look down in order to create sympathy. You see. Compassion is something else. Compassion, in fact, it's wrong to even call it thinking. Compassion just breaks your heart. The hero is a person whose faculty of compassion was functioning at the time of the heroic deed. The hero is that person who, perhaps not thinking, walked across the bridge, saw the child, and before they could think, the compassion faculty kicked in, and it linked them with that drowning child, and he had to jump into the river to save the child. And when you ask these heroes why, they said, because I don't know what happened. All I can tell you is that if that child died, I would have died. It was like me dying. There was no distinction. The link has been made. The separation was formed. And the heroism followed it. That's why there's so few of us who are heroic. You ain't jumped in no bridge to save nobody. You see? Compassion. You see? So this process of meditation shuts down the thinking process to the extent that we can transcend the limitation of those possessions that are related to our ego, that contraction that we call mine and mine. You see? And we're able to have minimally the experience of compassion, which is a species of love, a derivative of love. And thereby we have removed the next one. This next one, self-esteem, is doing for the purpose of praise, or doing for pride, right? Acting on the basis of acquiring other people's praise. That's deep. That's deep. Much of your action is based on the soliciting of other people's praise. Huh? Now be honest with yourself. Look into it. Look into yourself. How much of what you do is simply based on your desire for other people's praise and recognition? Look into that. See that. And see the horror of it all. See the horror of it all. It causes you to live a pretended life. Your life is pseudo. It is false. It is a pretense. Hence, its lack of fulfillment and meaning. You don't feel fulfilled because you ain't living in relationship to yourself. No how. You're living on the terms of your public. You are a politician. You're looking for votes in the form of these vigilance of praise. And your life becomes a pretense. Pure pretense. Fraud. Pseudo. False. And the immature ego can live like that because they don't want nothing no way. But if we have the real desire, then we have to transcend it. This stage of living for the basis of praise from other people, this kind of experiencing of continuous pride in our actions, this feeling that I am the doer. When you shut down the mind, when you shut down thinking, when you have learned how to live without thinking. I know this sounds strange to you. I know it does, because you've been thinking that every action that you do is done as a result of your thinking. And I'm telling you something that is probably totally radically outside your experience. I am telling you that none of your actions is flowing from anything you think. Your thinking is an illusion. The actions are going to flow anyhow. Life is happening to you. Has no connection whatsoever. The fear in the immature ego is that, Bhagwan, if I stop thinking and stuff like that, I'm going to become immobile. No, nonsense. The law of karma will mandate that you act. You have no option. Things happen. It's like the spring comes and the grass grows by itself. The grass need not do anything. Behold the lilies in the field. They neither sweat nor toil. But I say unto you, this is still true 2,000 years later. Your feeling of separateness is your ego that is giving you the feeling that if I don't do it, it won't get done. This is your ego. The whole you're sitting in a universe that is in motion. That is what is the cause of your well-being. And because you think you are alone, that you got to do everything. And this is a great source of suffering. Because it's not, it's you against the world. It's you against the universe. There's nobody on my side. God has abandoned me. No one is helping me. If I don't do it, it won't get done. This is a horrible way to live your life, where you have contracted your well-being into the domain of your tiny old efforts. And what can you do? You can't change one hair's breadth. You are so powerless. And you know that. And that is what causes you so much anxiety. On the one hand, you are trying to do everything, and on the other hand, you know you ain't got no power to do nothing. And now you're caught in this dilemma of powerless anxiety. Now you're headed for a psychiatric ward. You understand? You're headed for Prozac. You're headed for alcohol. You're headed for dope. You see, you're headed for sexual promiscuousness. You're headed for food addiction. You see? You have put yourself in an impossible situation. This illusion that you are the doer is transcended as you go through the trans-egoic stages. And then by learning how to live in a state of meditation, you have the experience that you're not the doer. Have the experience, I said, that you're not the doer. Not read a book saying that you know you're not the doer. That's not the same thing. When you have learned to take your meditation and extend it throughout your day-to-day, throughout all your activities, when you are in a state of meditation, and we don't understand meditation, you keep thinking by meditation, I mean a few hours that you set aside in the morning for formal practice. That's not what I call meditation. It's part of it. Meditation is a perpetual state of mind. It is moment to moment. And unless you can live in this moment-to-moment state of meditation, then you cannot lose the experience of being a doer and therefore be relieved of all of this suffering that you are undergoing because you think you have to do everything. You won't lose the experience. By perpetuating the state of meditation, keeping this mind in discipline, shutting down this thinking process, moving through the day without thinking, not caught up in that. And then you will simply see. And remember, meditation really means to see. Often the word for meditation, translated out of the Sanskrit, dhyana, means to see. Meditation means to see. To be in a state of meditation means that you can see clearly. This is called viveka, discrimination. The capacity to see. Freed up from your ideologies, your ideals, your concepts, your beliefs. To see clearly into life. And when you can see clearly into life, then you see that you're not the doer at all. That in reality, you do nothing. Life is truly a gift, in the truest sense. Now, what are you doing to breathe? Nothing. What are you doing to metabolize your food? Nothing. What are you consciously doing and debating and plotting and thinking to split your cell? Are you doing anything? Is it happening? Asdama sanatama, that's how it is. That's true across the whole board. But because of your ignorance of this process that extends even beyond your physiology, because of your ignorance of that process, you actually think you're doing something. And you don't know how to let go. In Taoism, the great gift that Lao Tzu's gave us is that Lao Tzu taught us how to let go and let down. Just flowing this down. There's nothing to do. It's beautiful. But unless you're able through a process of meditation achieve the requisite degree of discipline of this thinking process, you cannot lose the experience of being a doer. And until you lose the experience of being a doer, your dukkha will go on increasing. Are we doing for time, Bilal? 5 more minutes, we'll take our break. The next one, this image. This false image that you have created of yourself through meditation gets transcended. This identity, this image of who you are, through meditation gets evolved. Now, you, because of your identification with the body, just when you, and because of your other lower level, you've been thinking you're a man, woman. No. That gets knocked out. That whole image of yourself gets knocked out. What gives you your image of yourself? It is your thinking. What are you when you cease to think? When you are in a state of susupti, are you male or female? You have no experience of being either. Are you black or are you white? Drops out. Are you good and are you bad in a state of susupti? Gone. All gone. That's what Buddha means when he said gati gati, paragati saka. Gone, gone, all the way gone. All that stuff is gone. All this image that you've been dragging around, perpetuating. Now, what makes it even worse is that the fact that this image goes unchanged. Some of us, though, are so immature that we think we're the same person we were 10 years ago. You're not the same person you was 10 years ago. You're not even the same person you was 10 minutes ago, or 10 seconds for that matter. But you have got an image of yourself that you formed somewhere when you were a teenager, and you are clinging to that damn thing, and you cannot move. You see people trapped in the 70s, stack heels, big ass, super fly. They still caught up in the image that they formed of themselves when they was in high school someplace. And you can see these tragic old men and old women who are still clinging to the image that they had of themselves when they were 20 or 30. I seen a guy that from our old neighborhood. He's a player. And I remember him as a little boy in the 70s. He had a 1970 Cadillac. I'll never forget it. Green bottom, white convertible top. And he used to always have his top laid back. And he was a handsome brother. You know, older man though. Even then he had a little gray beard, a little gray hair, and he used to wear a little tam. I guess it was popular to be a French Negro. He was French. And he was a player. He was a player. Brother was a player. And he was just at that age, you know, that 40, 45, when you could still attract women a little older and a little younger. He was living in the best of both worlds, and he was smooth. Brother had class. And I'm going down Costner a few days back, and I see this brother sitting out in an old beat up, not a Cadillac, old beat up Pontiac, right? All dented in the side, tore, but it was convertible. And he had the top back, and still had his tam on, and he was still leaning.
20 years later.
30 years later. Clinging to an image of himself that is gone, no longer relevant to reality. And we all do that. Now you clinging to some bullshit. I'm telling you the truth. You're clinging to bullshit. And you're messing your whole life up. Some of us are still clinging to that persona we developed in high school of being cool. You know, I'm cool. Yeah, I get it. I mean, you know, I got it. Yeah, I'm the man. You ain't 17 no more. This is not high school. You're still getting up, going and saying what you got on the bottle. You ain't 15 no more. That ain't cool. That ain't nowhere. You getting high. You preoccupied with get out. What is this? This is nonsense. This is 13, 12-year-old bullshit behavior. And you clinging to the, well, you know, that's how I am. I like my drink. This is madness. This is madness. And through a process of meditation, you see, we're able to shut down this mind in such a way that we're able to stop the thinking that gives support to the manifestation and perpetuation and maintenance of this false image of ourselves. And remember, the mystic said you have developed a false image of yourself. The image that you develop of yourself is false by definition, because it's not based on your own investigation. It is based on hearsay. It is based on feedback from people who don't even know themselves. False image. Investigate your image. Look into it. Look into it. Have some courage. You say you got courage, right? You say you're brave. Okay. Here's a real opportunity to use your courage. Look into this image that you have of yourself. See its falseness and become free. And become free. Meditation does that. It shuts down that whole thinking process that maintains this false image in your captivity. It is a silly thing. It is a silly thing. And this is why these gurus and mystics are so dangerous. They're very dangerous people. That's why they've been killed. They're not just killing Jesus just to be killing Jesus. They weren't just boiling Mansoors just to be boiling Mansoors. They were not burning the huts of Dadus and Tukarams just to be burning the huts, just to be doing stuff. These people are dangerous because they're going to destroy your ego. They're going to destroy your self-image, and that's going to hurt you. You want to cling to your bullshit. And with the guru, you can't do that. Hence, many disciples will turn against the guru. That's understandable. It makes sense because the guru is going to hammer you. He's going to tear your ego up. He's going to be a death unto you. And that's what we need. Because we don't have the maturity to let go of this image of us. And that is why so many of us seek solace in some dead past foregone. Because with a Jesus, you are safe. Absolutely safe. Because Jesus is not here. You can get away with your nonsense. Buddha is gone. Gate. Now, you can say anything in the name of Buddha. But Buddha is not here. Hence, the living Guru, the living master, is always there. Because they will challenge you. They will challenge you. So, be reminded that when we talk about ego and all these other things, then there's some risk you have to take in coming to the workshops. Because I would have to go on behalf of all of these great gurus, pointing out these things over and over again, that you really got to drop your bullshit. You're full of bullshit. Holy bullshit, yes, but bullshit. No. You see, no talk mysticism, no talk religion. None of that. None of that. That's not going to get it. You're going to have to do this if you want what you come with. The sixth, the rational. The most amazing thing that happens through this process of meditation as you shut down the thinking process is that you simultaneously open up other faculties that were laying dormant, that were being obscured by the thinking process. And one of those processes is the intuitive faculty is available now. Because again, you've been feeling that you can only have knowledge through thinking. And even in spite of the fact that through all of your thinking, you are still messing your life up. You still unscrewed it up with all of your thinking. All of your ponder. Is it to be, to not to be? Is she the right one? Is she not the right one? Is he the right one? Should I marry? Should I not get married? I mean, and you put all that stuff and then you still are messing up because you don't have the capacity to have no authentic knowledge at this rational level. And you pinging to your pondering, as if you got some knowledge, as if you can do something to know anything at that level. And through the process of meditation, you see, shutting down this thinking process, now the intuitive faculty opens up automatically and pure knowledge descends whole. You don't even have to think. It is just there. Wisdom is there. Now you know what to do. Exactly what to do. And you have become spiritually strong enough to do it. Because remember, sometimes to do that which is correct requires that you transcend a lower part of your ego. That part of your ego that is totally linked with the body now only seek comfort. And the right thing may be discomfortable to the body. And you are not mature enough to set aside the comfort of the physical body in order to act out of your highest intelligence. You ain't mature enough to do that. Bhagwan, the meditation hurt. Okay, it hurts. What's the problem? Why you keep telling me this? I know it hurt. I'm not stupid. Yes, it hurt. Do you want to act out of your intelligence or do you want to act out of your body? Now you choose. You want a path that is going to please your body. I don't have one for you. Go to the storefront church. They specialize in giving you paths that appease your bodies. I don't deal in that. You see? I don't deal in that. It's going to hurt. Yes. Discipline it. Go through the pain. Have some intelligence. Bhagwan, should I marry this man? Hell no. Do not marry him. Going to ruin your life. But I'm so in love. No, you are not in love. You are attached. You are in lust. You are identified with some lower portion of your body somewhere. You are so egotistically disorder that you can't even be alone. You are so weak that you just suffering from loneliness and you call it loneliness love. Girl, get your shit together. You don't want to hear that. But that's the right answer. When I said, well, no, maybe it's like this. Read a book. Because you can't stand this yet. But this is the truth. You too weak. You can't be alone. And until you can be alone, you can't be with nobody else. Because you are moving into a relationship because you are lonely. You are weak. You are inadequate. You feel deficient. Psychologically, you are too immature to be happy alone. So you need somebody else to help you be happy. You see? You're still an infant on the ego hierarchy. You're still too little for love. You're too small for relationships. You need to work on yourself. And you're not going to like that. You're not going to like that. That's the truth. As we pull off the rational restriction on consciousness, then we're able to see truth for the first time. And remember, for the first time, you're able to see the truth. You're able to see the truth. And it is this truth that sets you free from all of these unnecessary degrees of suffering. But that is only possible through meditation, not through talk mysticism, not through talk religion, not through satsang, through meditation. You're able to transcend the rational limitations on consciousness. No other way. And have some real knowledge, infallible knowledge, knowledge that is never wrong, never taken wrong. And that is the meditation. And remember, as we peel away each of these limitations, our experience of being separate goes on diminishing. Goes on diminishing. Diminishing. And our experience of oneness, of totality, goes on increasing. And with that, there go on manifesting in our outward life an increase of the display of love. Whenever you want to know, Anita was asking me, she said, Bhagwan, boy, what kind of man are you? What did you do your last time? She always asked me, Bhagwan, can you go inside and do all of it? You see, Vanita is right. These are the right questions. But you need not be wholly dependent upon my remarks. Watch how I love. If you do not see any demonstration of love from me, know I am a fraud. And know it about anybody. Anybody that has made any spiritual progress will always demonstrate more love, more compassion, more understanding, more gentleness. By definition. You can't have it the other way. And then fools will come in here every day. Bhagwan, I've read this, I've read that, I've been on the path, I've been seeking. And I'm looking up saying, well, who have you been in love with? Where's your love? There's no evidence of any love in your life. What is nonsense are you talking? This is nonsense. I read the Bhagavad Gita. I know about karma. If you know about karma, then demonstrate that knowledge by being more loving. You know about karma and you still are eating meat. You don't know anything about karma. Bhagwan, I know about karma, and you still shooting dope. You still drinking alcohol. You are a fool. Lost in the lower dimensions of your ego somewhere. Arrogating to yourself a knowledge that you don't have and probably will never have for a long time. Your knowledge is always reflected in your living, with no exception. And that living that is based on high knowledge will always become more and more loving. More and more loving. Not less. Not less. Meditation is that process that gives us not only the knowledge, but gives us the capacity to apply the knowledge. We have already learned how to discipline our body. And our body is not running our life no more. We're running this body. And if I tell this body, sit in this corner for 2 hours, you better sit, body, in this corner for 2 hours. You're not running me. I run you. But your body runs you. If your body doesn't want to sit, then you don't sit. Simple as that. That whole process has to be reversed. And then, of course, this seven. The seventh stage of the ego, where the ego starts developing a will, an intent. It starts trying to do something deliberate. Start trying to live on purpose. And it goes through all of that. But I wash your face, and whenever I even put the question out there, what are you trying to do with your life? I know you don't know the answer to it, because you really don't know what you're trying to do with your life. You don't have a clue. That's why you come here. You hoping, Bhagwan, can you give us a hint? what I'm doing with my life? You see? Through meditation, you see, when we go in, the first thing we discover is our Dhamma. You find that purpose because you're in this world. And you've been sent with a tremendous gift, and you don't even know what your gift is, and can't nothing be more tragic than your ignorance of your gift. You don't know what you got in yourself. You just don't know who you are. And this is sad. That this Creator has put something so unique in you, so magnificent in you, and you don't know what it is, and you live in the life of a clown and of a buffoon and of a fool, when buried deep in you is this immense gift that the Lord has put in you, and you are wasting this gift. And meditation takes us inside to see that, and we're able to see what that gift is. And this is perhaps the most transforming experience that you have in meditation, is that you see your gift, you find your Dhamma, you find that which you are, and then you live that, you see? And for the first time, your life has, for the very first time, for the very first time. And again, all of this is achieved through the process called meditation. It's meditation. And that's what the mystics have come, you see, because they're out of their compassion. These mystics, they know who we are. And it's out of their compassion that they teach us. They have no need to do that. They could just kick back and enjoy their own bliss of their own enlightenment. But they come out of that blissful state only because they have seen in us, you and me, they have seen that thing in us, and they know what that is. I can remember Harrison High School. Bigama and Balam, I remember, there was a teacher there named Mrs. Martin. And Mrs. Martin was my homeroom teacher. And Mrs. Martin, because she was an authentic teacher, had a teacher's eye, and therefore could see deep into her students. Most teachers have no capacity to see deep into their students, hence their inability to effectively teach. But Mrs. Martin had this gift, apparently. And I can remember one day while cutting school, sitting out on the fire escape, smoking me a joint, having a little wine. Had been absent 65 days. Mrs. Martin somehow, miraculously, from across the expanse of a parking lot, saw me sitting on the fire escape, and she raised that powerful finger up in the air and beckoned. You see? And the reason it had effect on me, because see, I really loved Miss Martin, because Miss Martin, Miss Martin wasn't a Hollywood beauty. And even then I was sensitive to the fact that she must have suffered immensely in her life. Very Negroid features, you see. But you would call just ugly, woman, not attractive at all. You see? And the children would make fun of her, you see. And I identified with that, and I loved her, you see. But I still went more in class. But I loved her. And it's so much so that when she beckoned for me, that finger was enough and I come. So I set my wine down and, you know, pinch my roach, right? And I began to cross over the parking lot to see what's going on with Mrs. Martin. And as I got closer and closer to Mrs. Martin, I could see that Mrs. Martin was kind of distressed. You see, I could see the tracks of her tears. I could tell this woman been crying. What's going on here? Perhaps somebody has stolen something, did something to her car. My mind is racing, trying to figure out what's going on here. And as I'm thinking and reflecting, I'm becoming angrier and angrier because, you know, if somebody been messing with Miss Martin, now we'll have to change some situations up to today because I always came to school prepared to change situations. And I had my change situation people with me. So I was capable that day of changing whatever the problem was. I'm capable of handling that. And I was getting in that mood as I got there, right? You see, because I came up there that day looking for something. You see, I was looking for some savor. And as I got closer and closer to Miss Martin, and Miss Martin, I discovered that the cause of her anguishness and agony was the cause of her tears. It was me. And she talked to me all of what could be no more than 5 minutes. And I won't go into all of that. But she spoke love to me. And for those of you who haven't had the experience of having love spoke to you, it's impossible for me to tell you what that's like. And she pleaded with me to relieve her of her agony and her suffering by making something of myself, not to waste my intelligence. She was the first to speak to me of my Dhamma, right? And I promised, I said, Miss Martin, I want to. And I crossed the lot, went to night school, got back into high school, went on and did that thing. Because she spoke to something in me, and I can remember graduating from Roosevelt University the first time and taking that little mock degree back to Harrison, finding Miss Martin, laying it at her feet and touching her. You see? Because this was education, par excellence. These professors taught me nothing about me. This woman taught me about me. And she, for me, is a guru. That is what these great teachers can do. Can you imagine what these great Buddhas did? what a Buddha did for a Sariputta or Mahakayashiapa, or what a Kabir did for a Charandas. You see? What a Krishna did for an Arjuna was to remind them of who you are. And that's the problem. You don't know who you are. Maharaj used to say that you are kings and you are queens and you are out here living a life of paupers and beggars. And this is not right. Meditation then is that way to discover thy real self. And then that answer to the question, what are you trying to do with your life, will get answered clearly for the first time. Now, Bilal, I think we went a little long, so we'll take our break, and we should return at about 2:20 at the latest, and we have some juice. Let us continue our discussion on ego and ego management as it relates to spiritual development. And to help us get a better understanding of what meditation is all about, the philosophy behind meditation, its distinction from other things that are often referred to as meditation, Pam has been kind enough to put together some information for us in the form of a discourse, and at this time she'll be sharing it with us. And I know that you all, like me, as Pam, we're very grateful to you. I know that the kind of energy it takes to go out and hunt for the rest of the pack alone, but we will certainly help you devour your kill. So with no further ado, let's have Pam come up and for the next half an hour or so talk to us about these things, and then we'll close out the workshops with a few comments on what we discussed earlier and talk a little bit about next time. All right. Thank you, Pam.
I have to be honest with you in saying that I don't feel like I'm adequately prepared, but maybe that's part of my ego that's saying that, but that's how I feel. Personally, for the years I've been on this path, I've not personally experienced meditation at the level in which I feel liberated as an individual, but I have, throughout my lifetime, had experience with prayer, and I can speak more personally about prayer than about the meditation, so I just want to say that up front. The prayer that I have learned came as a result of my conditioning as a child, and also in my search on the path, I ran into people like Bhagwan, who in some way impressed me, and I listened and learned some things. So what I'd like to do today, to the best of my ability, is just talk about some of the distinctions between prayer and meditation. In my investigation, and this investigation is not thorough, not in any way, it's more, to me, pretty surface. I only use a couple of sources to come up with this information, but one of the things that became very apparent to me was that worship can be performed at 3 levels. And those 3 levels are physical, at the physical level, in which you're doing ceremony or rituals or things of that nature. When you go into scriptures, holy books, on a physical level in which people can see what it is that you're doing. The other level is verbal, in which you are petitioning, you're praying, and the third level is mental, and that's the level of meditation that Bhagwan's talked so much about today. The type of worship that one chooses, I would imagine, has a lot to do with 3 factors. One could be conditioning, like I said earlier. I grew up in a Christian home, so I learned how to pray a certain way. The other is temperament. Some people who are very intelligent may be drawn immediately to a meditative path. Others might just like the prayer because of their immaturity, their spiritual immaturity. So the types of worship that you would choose, I would say, has a great deal to do with any of those three things: conditioning, temperament, and your spiritual maturity, or a combination of all of those things. For those who are wishing liberation or lasting peace, meditation still is the king in this age of Kali Yuga. It can be brought about by the reciting of the holy names. If you've been initiated, you've been given those holy names. Or it can be done by dwelling on the divine attributes of the Lord, or even visualizing the holy form of the guru or one's ideal at the eye center. Visualization means calling up the image of the divine with love and reverence. And what we read in the books, like The Path of the Master by Johnson, is that when you go into those higher realms, you're supposed to see the form in an illuminated fashion. So the form is light, full of light. Thinking about divine qualities like love, compassion, and purity can also bring about peace, according to Swami Brahmananda. He's one of the disciples of Swami Ramakrishna. I think that's his name. Meditation, we've learned, comes in 3 different stages. The first stage is a misnomer in that we sometimes think of concentration as being meditation, but Bhagwan has told us many times that that in fact is not meditation. That is simply nothing more than concentration. That is the level in which you are focusing, you're doing japa or you're doing simran. So at that level you are just concentrating on some holy names. 5 holy names that have been given to you by a guru, or it could be names that you've chosen to be compassionate, like the qualities that I spoke of earlier. Bhagwan Ra Afrika has said to us many times that meditation is essentially the capacity to see into the nature of the ego. It's so important because we feel ourselves to be separate from God, and therein lies our problems, our feeling that we're separate from God. Buddha, who Bhagwan has talked of many times, in fact he said that Buddha is one of his favorite of the saints, has defined compassion and love together as making up meditation. So compassion as love together form meditation in a dynamic way. Meditation, according to Bhagwan Rajneesh, is nothing more than a device to make you feel aware of yourself. He further states that meditation includes 3 steps. The first of which is relaxation, watching your thoughts with no fight, watching the mind without judgment, and then last, the silence. He goes on to mention what the fruits of meditation are. One of which is abiding joy for no reason at all. When somebody is really in a deep meditative state, they're just happy. They're not happy because they're making 6-figure salaries, or because they're driving a Rolls Royce, or because they're in a wonderful relationship. They're happy, and they can't quite pinpoint what it is that's bringing about this happiness. You know, it's no reason at all for it. So at this stage, the fruit is that you are totally without reason just joyful, totally unconditional. The next fruit is intelligence that can be rediscovered. Bhagwan Rajneesh feels that the only method that can bring about rediscovery through intelligence is meditation. One learns to respond truly to situations independent of conditioning. So I think what he's saying here is that to be truly intelligent, and I think that Bhagwan has said this today when he talks about the sixth level, the level of rationality. When you're at this level, intelligence is rediscovered in a way that we've never been able to put our hands on. At this level, we learn how to respond to life situations independent of our conditioning. So before we would have responded to a situation in a set way, but when you have truly rediscovered intelligence, according to Bhagwan Rajneesh, you do so independent of whatever the conditioning is. So again, it is truly rediscovering what intellect really is. Then he goes on to say that another fruit of meditation is an understanding of aloneness, is your inherent self-nature. Meditation is equal to bliss. In being alone, one is really alive. When you become capable of it, you feel this aliveness. You feel no dependence anymore on anybody or any situation or any condition. You are essentially detached, and he's talking a lot about detachment. And this is how you feel at this stage. And you're okay with that aloneness. And like the other two I mentioned, what struck me most was that this is not a temporary thing. This is an abiding thing. You're like this all the time. You feel this aloneness and you're okay with it. You feel this intelligence and you feel connected to everything. And you feel this abiding joy and you just don't know why. You're just blissful. Another fruit is growing sensitivity. In this growing sensitivity, you feel a great sense of belonging to the world, and all living things take on an immense importance to you. And Bhagwan talked about this today too, as you go higher in your maturity of your ego. All of a sudden now everything is important. The grass, the sun, and everything seems to be related to one. So I guess an enlightened person would see everything as one. They would no longer feel separated. So it's almost like it seems to me almost like a total merging with everything. So of course at this stage your ego would have been ascended over your ego. So you would not be thinking about yourself. You would not see yourself as being separate from anything else. So everything is important. Nothing more important than the other. Just everything just takes on this importance. The next fruit is love. And Bhagwan Rajneesh speaks of love as being the fragrance of meditation. Love deepens in an authentic way, and the authenticity of it is born not out of the mind, but out of something outside of the mind. Then we have the experience of the great silence. At this stage, the mind is emptying. Pardon me. The experience of the great silence, it's not empty as one might think. Pardon me. So when we think of silence, sometimes people think of it, having not experienced it, as being empty or void. But according to Rajneesh, that couldn't be further from the truth. It's not empty at all, as one might think. it's overflowing with a music that grows and is beautiful, more so than anything you've ever heard before. And inside my literature, they talk about that. In fact, that is the third arm of meditation. When is that called? Bhagwan? Bhajan. When you listen for the sound carrot, you listen for this beautiful music. This is what Rajneesh is talking about. This is the silence that he's referring to. And in accompaniment of this, there's a light that can only be seen with the inner eye. And he's talked about that light too. So everything that Rajneesh is saying backs up what my literature says. There's no difference in it. And it seems, as Bhagwan said earlier, all the mystics have said this, and they all corroborate with this. Meditation and japa, or simran, are natural ways of resting and filling the mind with new freshness. And I remember when, because I'm far from being an enlightened person, and I'll be honest with you, I'm very delinquent in terms of the meditating. I don't meditate the way I should, but I will say this: when I first started dabbling in meditation, the masses, or those people who were out there teaching meditation, taught that this would be the outcome of it. You would feel better. I recall taking a yoga class, and in that yoga class, at the end of doing the hatha yoga, the relaxation of the body, we would go into a meditation, and you would feel very relaxed, so much that you would fall asleep. But then if you're falling asleep, that goes against what we know meditation. You don't want to fall asleep in meditation. You want to keep yourself focused. Meditation is supposed to be awareness. So I've learned, as I look in my past, what I've experienced of meditation, it was so far from what true meditation is supposed to be about. I was falling asleep, and when I fell asleep, I said, oh wow, I'm really meditating. I'm really doing something. I really thought I was getting into something, because I guess in a way maybe I was at that level. And that is important to remember too, because if you're doing any kind of meditation, that's probably good. It's all good, really. Anytime you divorce yourself from distractions from the outside, and you allow yourself to just sit and become a little more aware, that's good. So at that point in my spiritual maturity, that was good, and that was okay, and that was enough. But after coming here and learning about what meditation is truly is, there's no other. Once you learn what it truly is supposed to be about. So with this japa, or this simran, you will feel this new freshness of mind. Through meditation, the mind flows in a natural way toward our source of energy, namely the true self. And that's when we make contact. I'm assuming that's when we make contact. I'm not certain. As I said before, my knowledge is not first-hand, it's second-hand. I went to books, and I just researched it. So I don't honestly know for certain. Thus, the heart and soul of mystical life is an inner experience gained only via meditation. And we've heard our guru say this again and again, that that's the only way. That's the only way that you're going to be able to become liberated, is to experience this inner peace through meditation. Now, I want to talk a little bit about prayer. As I said earlier, I'm probably more familiar with prayer because I've actually experienced prayer. I've prayed all my life, and most of the time when I prayed, I prayed out of fear. Prayer is the form of worship most widely used and familiar to the masses. Historically, more people have prayed for the wrong reasons. For example, men asking God to slay their enemies, or bring riches or harmonious relationships, or even health. These effects have been born out of an ignorance of God's true nature. Primitive man prayed to God for protection, deliverance, and resources of all kind. In many respects, contemporary man has not changed much in his form of worship. Yet it's important to note that not all prayer takes on this negative tone. All of mankind doesn't beg, petition, or bargain with God for things they feel will bring happiness. Little regard, however, is oftentimes paid toward self-realization or liberation. And that probably is one of the major difference between prayer and meditation. In meditation, you are seeking liberation. And you are emptying yourself so that you can be filled with prayer. Oftentimes, there's very little regard to wanting to become liberated or wanting to become self-realized. When you're praying, you're bargaining. You might say something like to God, if you don't let my child die, I'll be saved, and I'll do this and I'll do that. So it's the tendency to bargain with God. And there's oftentimes, with the masses, there's oftentimes little regard to truly wanting to liberate oneself beyond what, as Bhagwan has said many times, what a minister might say are the outward things that one might do, like maybe not drinking, not cursing, just doing the outward things. But in terms of wanting to make our inner evolution, there's not much thought to that at the level of prayer. Another source that I came across, and this is an old source because before I came here, I used to read a lot of Joel Goldsmith, and this is from my experience in the church. Joel Goldsmith, but some of what he says makes some sense. Not all of it, but some of it to me. Joel Goldsmith talks about the need to reach an altitude of prayer where true communion can happen. And so what Joel is saying is that just like meditation has different grades, so also does prayer. And if in fact you want to pray effectively, you want to reach for that higher altitude of prayer where your prayers can really be heard, and where there's no selfishness, no selfish motivations involved in praying. Prayer doesn't differ in its motivation based on the understanding and spiritual majority of the aspirant. That doesn't make sense. Faith is one of the most essential things in prayer. And I think we all know that because we've heard that if we grew up in the church. If you don't have any faith, then how can you expect your prayers to be answered? So you have to show strong faith if you expect that your prayers are going to be answered. In order that prayer be effective, it must be based on the belief that God is one's sole refuge under all circumstances. And there are a lot of people in church who I think are at this level. And I think that as we grow in our maturity, we can get to that level, because even if you're meditating, you still have to, I think, come to an understanding that, as Bhagwan was saying, you don't have any control. So since you don't have any control, God is your all in all. And I recall when I was attending New Thought churches, a popular saying then, and probably still is let go and let God. And I think that sort of epitomizes what you should experience at this higher altitude of prayer. You have to really just let go Just drop it all and just let God do what he's going to do, because that's what's going to happen anyway. Even though we come to realize we're not the doer, as we grow in spiritual maturity, most people still don't truly trust God to do their bidding. And that's how most of us come to God, to do our bidding. God, will you do this for me? God, will you do that for me? And if you do this for me, I will do this for you. As if God would care. People pray out of fear, worry, and apprehension. Nevertheless, the spiritual devotee prays out of the depth of his heart. His prayer is expression